now, we'll be talking about the Prime Minister suffering that major revolt. 60 Tory rebels rebelling against his Rwanda plan. Big amendment votes yesterday. Of course, though, the big vote is tonight on the actual vote, well, on the bill as it actually stands tonight. Are there going to be amendments that do get through from either the One Nation side or indeed these one, I suppose, the red wall Tories like Jonathan Gullis, who we spoke to earlier, trying to amend the bill to make it tougher? Well, joining me right now is immigration lawyer Ivon Sampson. Good morning to you, Ivon.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, I must just, before we get onto this, I just must get to put you a point we just had from a caller, William in West Sussex, and he was asking a question of my guest here in the studio, Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, who's put forward suggestions and has, for the last 6 years, been basically sort of lobbying Number 10 on a way of dealing with this illegal migration crisis. And I think anyone who doesn't accept that tens of thousands of people coming to our shores on dinghies, risking their lives over the channel, if they think that's not a crisis, frankly, they're not living in the real world. It certainly is in many different ways. But this gentleman was suggesting, clearly a military man, actually, we take, big British warships, take them into the channel under a different flag, a flag of convenience, the Rwandan flag, he's suggested. People rescued, taken in the middle of the channel, taken on board, never at any point touching British shores, and taken to Rwanda or taken to the Ascension Islands or anywhere else, and never actually touching our shores, and that is really the only thing that's going to work. What do you make of that plan?
Well, it's not the sort of policy a country like the UK would I would argue would be doing, because we have to comply with international obligations.
What's not complying with international obligations
like
there?
Sorry?
What's not complying with international obligations?
There's maritime laws about rescuing people.
Yes,
for example,
you would be rescuing people.
And we are members of international treaties like SOLAS, which requires us. And then there's obligations. If somebody gets on the boat and says, I wish to claim asylum, then we have an obligation to entertain that asylum application. And remember,
but we can but we have an obligation to make, and quite rightly, to rescue people at sea. Some people suggest, leave those people. No, absolutely not. We have an obligation to do that. Well, you're picking them up, and yes, you can process their asylum application. Yes, we've already made it law. Supreme Court has accepted that the principle of running, going through these asylum applications somewhere overseas is acceptable in law, both international and in national law. So why would that be an issue?
Look, I can only advise you about our obligations and the spirit of the Refugee Convention. Let's talk about the spirit of it.
There we go.
Don't be a member of a convention and circumvent it by using some clever ruse to avoid your obligations.
But it doesn't avoid our obligations.
Let me finish. If you don't want refugees in your country, Julia, if we don't want people coming in to claim asylum, then get out the convention. But don't try and do it a roundabout the way. So on the face of it, you look like you're a good human rights country, but really you're not, because you just want to not have them here in the first place.
Okay, I mean, again, I think a lot of people don't want these people here. They don't believe they're genuine, and they don't believe that if they are genuine, that they're remotely the most deserving. Yeah, I on one level I agree with you. Let's just be honest about this. But we also know this is what an awful lot of other countries in Europe are now looking at, and perhaps even some of the countries you wouldn't expect, the Swedens, the Netherlands, and others joining countries like Italy and France, going, we need to deal with this issue. This is no longer sustainable, and we know this is going to be a growing issue.
If you want to have a country like that, go and live in Russia or Belarus. They're two
countries that people don't want to go to.
Yes, I mean, those countries are not in the convention. Why? I wonder why.
The trouble is, as you know, the convention was begun at a time when things were very different. We didn't have the absolutely huge mass scale of not just people fleeing war and persecution, but also economic migration that we are seeing right now from poorer countries to the first world. The question about that is, whether people want to come here or not, that's their choice, but whether people here have enough space to accommodate them, can afford to accommodate them, or want them here is another debate.
I agree. I agree with you. I agree totally with you.
What do you make about...
We can't take everyone.
No, well, look, but again, I can't find anyone who supports our current asylum laws who will give me a number when we go, well, yeah, we've taken all deserving in we can, all these 20-year-old men, supposedly from Somalia or wherever. I mean, we've taken all of them, and now the doors are closed, because at some point we have to say, that's all we can afford to take.
I agree. We can't take everyone.
But
We
you're
just
not allowed
can't.
to do that under the convention.
Well,
You're not
I'm
allowed to.
saying
You're not allowed to put a number on it, are you? You have to take
it needs a
everybody.
review. It needs a review. We need to have a look at that convention, see if it's working. But we're here to talk about the safety of Rwanda asylum and
Well,
immigration.
again, I don't want to get back to it. You're quite right. In terms of the rebellions yesterday, look, we talked about the politics of it with an MP. In terms of the bill as it stands so far without any of those amendments, there are more coming today, Safety of Rwanda bill. Do you think that that bill, as it stands currently and as it's likely to be voted on tonight, will actually provide a deterrence and will help solve the problem and, as Rishi Sunak has pledged, stop the boats?
It won't work. And look, it's the first time a government has proposed a bill that declares a country safe. I mean, it's never happened before. And what it's asking you to do is to ignore the ruling of the Supreme, well, asking the Supreme Court, if it looks at it again, to ignore the ruling of its own ruling that it made in December.
It's not ignoring it, it's abiding by the Supreme Court ruling, saying they don't believe they've got the right assurances that South Africa is safe. They've got those assurances, South Africa, sorry, Rwanda. They've got those assurances, so they're abiding by it.
Well, the court made a finding they didn't accept the assurances. Look, what it does, clause 2, let's just look at clause 2. And what it does is it says to the court, we're going to put a blindfold on you. So if you have evidence which is contrary to the Rwanda bill, expert, independent evidence which says Rwanda's not safe, you've got to ignore that. And what you've got to do is do what we say. We say it's safe, and we want you to ignore any other evidence and your own ruling. That's the first part. Second part, it disapplies the Human Rights Act. So section 2, section 3, section 6 to 9 disapplies all of them. What it disapplies is that you can't look at previous case laws of the European courts, and you must interpret legislation ignoring the European Court of Human Rights. So it's very sneaky. Actually, to be honest with you, the bill is quite sneaky because it puts us binds the courts to ignore everything and accept what we say. What it should be, the bill should be renamed Black is White and White is Black bill. That's what it should be called.
But surely what the bill is trying to do is to establish that the British people, via Parliament, are sovereign, not a foreign court. And the courts in this country need to abide by the laws made by a democratically elected parliament.
I'll give you a quickie constitutional lesson. There's a thing called doctrine of separation of powers. What that means is,
thank you.
If you have effective checks and balances, courts have to scrutinise abuse of power by government.
Yes, of course they do. But courts also have a job to actually enforce the law as made by Parliament. This idea from human rights legislation, or indeed the European Convention on Human Rights, this and the Asylum Convention, this idea that these were signed up to by a government, you know, democratically elected Parliament and government, and that somehow they are now set in stone for all time and can never change when circumstances have changed, is ridiculous, because they were voted on by MPs in the first place. MPs have the right, governments have the right to change the law. That's the whole sodding point of us having elections. And they want to change the law because its law currently is not working. The idea that judges get to say, well, no, we get to decide what we think the laws are. Well, no, they enforce the law and apply the law as set up by a democratically elected parliament.
Not when it undermines the universality of human rights law. I disagree with you. Look,
but we've
if you're a judge,
signed up to those human rights laws. It's our elected governments that signed up to those.
Okay, if you're a judge and you're asked to look at, you're the Supreme Court judge, and they say, right, Julia, you decide on this, but you know what? Ignore these reports that tells you, independent expert, that it's not a safe country.
Yeah.
Ignore it, and ignore testimony of people who've had human rights abuses in Rwanda. Ignore that as well. But do you know what we're going to do? We're going to give you a piece of paper which says, we say it's safe. Tell me, is that the rule of law? Is that
I have no idea whether Rwanda is safe or not, other than the fact I know the EU countries and indeed the UN has on occasion sent people to be processed in Rwanda, so they seem to think it was safe. I don't want to be sent to Rwanda, but then I've not come from some war-torn country I've been persecuted. I think I'd be happy to be in a safer place than where I was. However, which country would be acceptable to lawyers like yourself where we can send people to be processed? Because the Supreme Court has accepted there's nothing wrong in principle or in law for people to be sent to another
Correct.
country processed. I mean, should we process them all in the Bahamas or the Cayman Islands? I mean, where would be acceptable?
Do you know where the government? Well, look, Australia. They got this idea from Australia.
Yeah.
That's what I
Worked
think it was
very
called
well there.
Operation Sovereign, or something like that. It was called. Do you know it's not running anymore? Do you know why? Because it was costing them
It's
zillions to
not running
send
anymore
each
because
person.
people stopped getting on the boats and coming to Australia because they knew they wouldn't ever get in.
No, it was the
No, yes,
cost of
that's
it. Look,
exactly what happened.
yeah, I agree. Look, we have a lot more in common than you think. I agree. We can't accept everyone. I agree. We need to have a new strategy. The Rwanda bill isn't it. At most, 500 people will go there.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you honestly think that people are going to stop coming because 500 people have been sent to
No, I couldn't
Rwanda?
agree with you
Maybe
more. I've
not.
been making that point again. Ivon Sampson, on that, let's end on agreement. Ivon Sampson, immigration lawyer. So
Pleasure.
appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed. Rear Admiral Chris Parry is still with me in the studio, and I have to say, Face has been a delight and a joy to watch throughout that conversation. Where do you want to start?
Well, you know what? I worry about expert capture. We were told that it's not about the law; it's about the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was about the law.
when I used to employ in the Navy accountants and lawyers, I used to say to them when I employed them, "Okay, I'm going to come up with ideas, and I want you to enable those ideas, not prevent them." And I would have to say, I wish our lawyers wouldn't conduct lawfare against
There's a lot of money in lawfare. There's a lot of money in the human rights lawyers. I mean, you know, a lot of them pretend to be doing goody-goodies, but actually they're making some serious dosh.
But we need people to actually enable us to be able to do the right thing, not
Well, it
actually
should be the
prevent
right
us.
thing. I don't want people to be coming to our shores and being... We still are a civilised country and we should be responsible, and they need to be in a safe country. And again, if we can prove some way that Rwanda is a safe country, the fact the UN has sent people there suggests to me that it is not 100% safe. I mean, I live in London, and London's not 100% safe, for goodness sake, but there's no reason for these people to be persecuted in any way in Rwanda.
But interestingly enough, there was an attempt to blind us with science there. You know, you don't understand the law. OK, we do understand the law.
Yep.
You just have to take people to a place of safety.
So that's the only requirement.
Okay.
But also this idea of the spirit. One of the reasons why things have got so much worse in terms of people not being able to be deported is because the spirit, the interpretation of the spirit of the law has changed. And again, you know, so you can be a gang rapist, you can be a gunman, and we've seen people who were supposed to be deported who managed to fight against the deportation, largely also thanks to idiot tourists on planes going, you stay free here in the UK, even though these people are a danger to our own families. These people, they argued that they have a right to privacy, a right to a family life. Like, no, you sodding don't. You weren't born in our country. You're not a British citizen. You've committed a heinous crime. Get the hell out. We don't want you anymore. But they've interpreted the spirit of the law that we have some duty of care to these people. I mean, no other country, they don't keep our people when they do that. They ship them back to us as our responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of people need to live with the consequences of some of their feelings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think that would...
Well, no, I've always said Keir Starmer's so happy in the Labour leadership. Every single one of their streets in Islington and Hampstead, we will forcibly buy up all of the houses. We'll give them we will pay well above the market rate for their very expensive houses, these lovely white stucco streets. We will buy up all of those houses and we will house, bedsit by bedsit, every single of these channel migrants. They are so happy to welcome. You live with it. You have them walking down the streets with your teenage daughters. You have them, hanging around the local street corners. See how you like it, because there's a reason why people don't want that in this country. There's a reason. Right.